All right, last March, an annual tradition at UMass-Amherst descended into a melee. Town and campus police officers donning riot gear were called in after a St. Patrick's Day celebration known as the Blarney Blowout. It got out of hand. Police fired more than 600 rounds of pepper spray and sting balls at unruly crowds, and 21 UMass students were arrested. But last week, an independent investigation into the incident concluded law enforcement was partly to blame for responding too aggressively. While the police chiefs for Amherst and UMass dispute that, the episode speaks to the concerns of critics who question whether campus police should be armed. WGBH News reporter Ron Sanders has our focus report.
Throughout the Boston area, most college campuses have their own deputized police force. For some students, knowing their campus is patrolled by armed officers is a comfort.
I think that it's a good idea just because we're in a city and a lot of unsafe things can happen in a city.
But for other students and some faculty, the visible presence of armed law enforcement is at odds with the academic ideal of free and open discourse.
I don't think arming campus security officers is really necessary.
Even if they're fully trained police officers?
Even if they're fully trained police officers.
The increase in armed campus police over the past decade is a concern for Cade Crockford of the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts. She says schools should leave the job of policing to local law enforcement.
There's a serious danger that arming campus police officers could actually result in students or faculty members being shot, either accidentally or as a result of an unnecessary escalation.
Crockford also questions the need for campus police in the first place.
A University of Virginia study found there's likely to be a shooting on college campuses about once in 166 years.
But the same study also puts that in different terms, saying there's an average of 26 murders per year on college campuses. And on any campus, one murder is one too many. MIT police officer Sean Collier was killed last year. In 2007, 33 people were shot to death at Virginia Tech. But Crockford says those tragedies support her argument.
Virginia Tech officers and Sean Collier himself were all armed during those violent incidents, so they're not actually a deterrent.
So what does that mean? That they shouldn't have guns because some of them are killed? I don't understand the logic of that.
James Allen Fox, a criminal justice professor at Northeastern, was part of a team of researchers that looked into preventing campus violence for the Massachusetts Department of Higher Education. Their resulting study recommended that campus police be armed and trained in the use of personal or specialized firearms.
Campus police, compared to the city police, they know the terrain. They know the buildings. They know the back alleys. They also know the individuals. So they are better at protecting the campus.
Not all colleges agree, such as Lesley University, which makes a point of saying on its website, our public safety personnel are not police officers and do not have powers of arrest, nor do they carry weapons of any kind. But state police say the majority of colleges in Greater Boston have full-service police departments staffed by officers who go through the same training as municipal officers. Boston University police officers have been armed for about 30 years. They say they enjoy a good working relationship with the Boston and Brookline police departments. But those departments have responsibilities other than this university, and the chief here says his officers have a much quicker response time because they're already here.
Usually, within the campus setting, we can get there within 1 to 2 minutes. And if we weren't properly armed, we'd have to rely on our colleagues in Boston or Brookline to respond, and it may be a delay that may, cost a life.
Affirmative, and you said a dump truck with a full load?
At more suburban schools, like Stonehill College in Easton, the police department relies on a mix. Unarmed community safety officers complement a force of 19 armed officers, which Chief Peter Carnes says is critical, especially on more rural campuses.
Response time is essential, and if you review any of the circumstances that have happened around the country, many of these unfortunate events on campuses usually start and end in a very short period of time.
Unlike the continuing debate over how we prevent gun violence on campus. Professor Fox agrees armed police may not be a good fit for some campuses, and he says that's their choice. And Emily, the study that he and other experts prepared for the Department of Higher Education also has a comprehensive list of other measures they should undertake, such as mental health services, electronic surveillance, drills, and response plans for active shooters. I checked with a number of sources today, and by all accounts, gun violence on school campuses and college campuses this year alone has claimed 16 lives and injured 39 people.
So the opposition, is it largely philosophical?
I think that's right. The ACLU says while this may not be rooted in a constitutional issue, they think there are legitimate concerns about the college experience being negatively affected, and that proponents as well, conversely, say that prevention and response are important here because although relatively rare, airline crashes and catastrophic weather occur. So does that mean you don't take measures to protect yourself against them?
All right. Ron Sanders, thanks for that. All right, I'm joined now by two of the authors of that Department of Higher Education study that Ron cited in his report. Elizabeth Englander is a social psychologist and the director of the Massachusetts Aggression Reduction Center at Bridgewater State University. And as we mentioned, James Allen Fox teaches criminology, law, and public policy at Northeastern University. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
So, Elizabeth, you had a little bit more reluctance about this. You're both involved in the study. You had more reservations about arming campus police officers. How so?
Well, I think my reservations were really only predicated on training. And I also think that it's important on campuses for police to get out into the community and to get to know the community, to get to understand the campus. I think that can really negate a lot of the negative effects that people are worried about. They don't want campuses to turn into armed camps. And I think that by moving towards community policing, we can really avoid some of those problems.
You know, Jamie, I think one of the concerns is that people feel campus police might not have enough to do. So they'll react over aggressively, maybe in the case of UMass Boston or UMass-Amherst, and that they're there to kind of be the aggressors towards the students rather than the protectors.
Well, you could say that about any rural community where the police have very little to do, but there's a population. So I don't think that argument. One thing I have to point out, Ron mentioned 16 individuals on campuses nationwide so far this year being murdered, which is about average, by the way, but that's out of 20 million college students, and you add to that all the staff and faculty. So the risk is extremely small.
Yeah.
But the fact that the risk is small doesn't mean that we shouldn't have armed police officers. I mean, students expect, when they see someone in a uniform with a badge, they expect they'll be armed. In fact, even an assailant will expect that their opponent standing in front of them will be armed. As long as they're trained, as long as they have arrest powers, they are police officers. They should have a gun. Now, that's different from campus security, like as mentioned. Security guards on campus, if they're not sworn officers, they should not. So you have two different kinds of protection on a college campus.
And let's face it, I don't want to generalize, but most crimes or incidents of violence on campus involved, sexual assault or drunken behavior. I mean, it's not pulling weapons on each other.
Interpersonal.
But still, you want somebody with authority to come and says, hold
That's
it right there, or whatever it is.
Because these shootings, and in 2008, when we prepared this report, we were really thinking about those mass shootings on campus. Those are incredibly traumatic and catastrophic events. You can't ignore that kind of risk and not prepare for it. But at the same time, you don't want to empower people who aren't trained to be careful with how they're coming across to their community and how they're communicating with the students and the faculty.
Let me add this too, that when the issue of guns on campus police comes up, people start talking about guns in the hands of faculty, for example, who might have a license and be trained, or even students. And there are 5 states now that do allow students and faculty on campus to carry guns. I think it's a terrible idea, first of all. When you think about the very low risk of serious violence on college campuses, but the very high level of depression among students, high level of alcohol use and drug use among students, guns on college campuses is a bad idea, except for the campus police.
What do you think of Lesley University advertising the fact or making that kind of a selling point, an attractive selling point. I would think they position that as that they do not have armed.
I think they're
police.
marketing it towards a particular type of student, who's going to be attracted by that idea. And it may be that because of their location, they're able to rely more on city police and local law enforcement. So it's completely different when you're in a suburban campus or in another area where you're not cheek and jowl with it. But I think it's really important to point out that, in this report, we really emphasized communication. We emphasized schools beefing up their mental health services. We emphasized that not only did they have to beef them up, they had to make sure people knew about them. A lot of students don't even know that their campus provides this kind of help. And we have a higher proportion than ever of students coming to college with mental health challenges. So
by the way,
really
Jim, if I'm on the campus of Boston University and I dial 911, who's going to respond? Is it the Boston?
Well, on your cell phone, you'll get the usual response.
Get the
You'll get campus
so
police.
how do these kids even know how to get campus police? I mean, I wouldn't.
They should be told. See, there's an orientation process.
Right.
The students need to know what to do in case. But let me also add this. There are a lot of colleges, out of fear of a mass shooting, which is very rare, they entertain drills. They have drills on campus where the students, faculty, staff, everyone is engaged in a what-if experiment or exercise. It's a terrible idea because it sends the message to students that, we wouldn't be having these drills were it not for the fact that you have a bullseye on your back. We have to keep it in very low key.
If right. Makes the police should salient.
There should be drills involving the campus police, city police, and if you want to have the administration there too, fine, but don't involve the students.
That's absolutely true. And those lockdown drills, which are done K through 16, they're done at universities, they're done all the way through school, really engender a lot of anxiety in children. And they're really not a good way, they're not a good preparation technique to rely on, and they're not good for mental health.
By the way, did your study look at how often people call campus police and what is the most common reason for calling?
Well, most commonly is not violent crime.
Right.
So let's keep that in mind. I think there's violent crimes on college campus, whether it be murder or rape, get all the attention, all the headlines.
But I think it's really theft.
Check my iPhone.
Right, it's theft. They're missing their cell phone or something like that.
In terms of crime generally, by the way, it's interesting that rural campuses have a higher rate of crime than urban campuses, which is opposite what people think. Because if you're on an urban campus, like Northeastern, for example, where I work, if a predator or a robber is interested in finding victims, don't hang around the university. What are you going to get, an iPhone? Go down to the Prudential Center. Much better attractive crime target. Plus, the Prudential Center doesn't have a campus police force like Northeastern does. Whereas you go to a rural campus out in the sticks somewhere, the campus is more attractive a crime target than the farmlands that surround it.
Good point. All right, James Fox and Elizabeth Englander, thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for having us.